Welcome back to the For Cultural Purposes podcast. I'm your host, Sean, and this week we're doing something a little different. Just one topic, but from a few different angles. I want to talk about how conspiracy theories got so loud, especially since COVID. Let me start by saying the Earth isn't flat. JFK wasn't shot by a magic bullet, and no, the moon landing wasn't filmed on a soundstage. But for millions of people, conspiracy theories feel better than reality because the truth is messy. And if you're like most Americans, you've probably got more month than money. And the time it takes to understand macroeconomics, climate science, or COVID policy feels out of reach. So instead, it's easier just to say, maybe they don't want us to know. In this episode, I want to explore why it seems to be easier to accept a lie that feels good than a truth that feels hopeless. America has a loneliness problem, not just post-COVID isolation. I mean the kind of loneliness that hollows you out until you need a reason, any reason, to feel important again. And when people feel unseen, unheard, unimportant, they reach for something, a story, a villain, a mission. You stumble into a Facebook group, a Telegram thread, a YouTube rabbit hole, and suddenly you've got a theory. But more importantly, you've got a tribe. Not a solution, just a loop. A place where your anger gets echoed back to you. And that starts to feel like clarity. But the truth, the real truth, is much worse. Today, scientists are struggling to study the effects of microplastics on the human body because they can't find a single person on Earth without them. There is no control group. That's not a theory. You want a conspiracy? Try this. A cancer drug called Revlimid costs $5 to make but sells for over $800, and that's legal. Or how about this? The Gulf of Mexico has a dead zone the size of New Jersey caused by industrial farm runoff into the Mississippi River. When I say dead zone, I mean no wildlife can survive because the chemicals from these farms create an algae, and when it dies, it consumes the oxygen in the water as it decomposes. And you've probably heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, a floating vortex of plastic waste, twice the size of Texas. We're living inside a slow motion conspiracy, but it's not being hidden, it's just normal. It's legal. And for some people, the moment they realize that is the moment the uniform comes off. Because nothing exposes a broken system faster than how it treats the people it once called heroes. Now imagine you're someone who served. You believed in the mission, the flag, the oath. You were told you were the good guy. That sacrifice was noble. That your country would take care of you. And then you come home, and the country you risked your life for can't even fix your paperwork. I know veterans still waiting on their full benefits, filing claims, appealing rejections for years, sometimes longer than they spent in combat. We've all heard the stories, soldiers who inhaled toxic burn pit smoke, exposed to cancer-causing chemicals, and watched the government pretend it wasn't a problem. They serve our country, then they're served with silence. It's not just the body that breaks, it's the belief. You're trained to see the world through discipline, duty, and order, and then you're dropped into a system that sees you as a budget line, where PTSD is labeled a paperwork error, where the uniform opens no doors, just old wounds. And that's when the algorithms find you. That's when the podcast host whispers, it wasn't the system, it was the deep state. You stop seeing patterns and start seeing plans, and maybe it's not true, but it feels like something finally makes sense because the lie gives you meaning again. It gives shape to the chaos. It makes your pain feel organized, even righteous. And when you've been discarded by the thing you believed in most, even a lie that sees you feels better than a truth that forgot you. And that feeling, it's not unique to veterans. You don't have to wear a uniform to feel discarded. Some people never got a fair shot in the first place. Their battlefield wasn't overseas. It was the first day of school. You don't need to wear a uniform to be discarded. Sometimes all it takes is your zip code. They call it school choice, a phrase that sounds like freedom, but usually just means one thing. If your parents have money, you get options. If they don't, you get left behind. It's marketed as an opportunity, but in practice, it siphons resources from the schools that need them most and funnels them into ones built for kids already on third base. You live in the right district, you get laptops, AP courses, field trips, teachers who aren't stretched to the edge. If you don't, you get crowded classrooms, underpaid staff, teachers that must pay out of pocket for supplies, and metal detectors before you ever see a counselor. And then they have the nerve to tell you it's about merit. I remember a friend coming to my apartment the night before the first day of school. They needed a light bulb just to take a shower. This was in the mid-90s, and the impacts of the crack generation were still being felt. Their parents were strung out, and they just needed a light to get ready for day one. I literally went to their house and helped put the bulb in. I was probably 13 at the time. That's where they were starting from. Now imagine that same kid makes it into an advanced class and sit next to someone with a college fund, matching pajamas on the holidays, and two parents who both show up for PTA night. Suddenly, school choice isn't abstract, it's personal. That's proximity. But instead of integrating kids, we sort them. ESL here, special ed there, AP in another wing. Gifted kids take field trips, behavioral kids eat in silence. To be clear, I'm not arguing against AP classes or extra support for kids who need it. I'm saying that the way we organize schools creates ripples that become riptides. We don't always admit what we're reinforcing. By the time that tassel turns, the hierarchy is no longer theory, it's muscle memory. You've internalized the role you were cast in: gifted, remedial, average, invisible. And when the outcomes start echoing those old assignments, it doesn't feel like coincidence, it feels designed. So you start looking, not for truth exactly, but for something that explains the shape of your struggle, something that makes the math of your pain make sense. And when no one offers clarity, the conspiracy offers comfort, because chaos without reason is unbearable, but injustice with a mastermind, that's something you can fight. We don't arrive at conspiracy by accident. We arrive through erosion, one institution at a time, failing us slowly enough to call it normal. If you're wondering why people fall into rabbit holes, it's because the ground gave out beneath them. I don't think most people truly believe the earth is flat. I think they're exhausted, overwhelmed by a system that needs poverty to function, where childbirth is still the #1 cause of bankruptcy for women, where a CEO can make 290 times what their lowest paid employee earns, where children go hungry in the richest country on earth, where dying because you couldn't afford insulin gets your obituary linked to a GoFundMe page. But instead, some of us fixate on space lasers. The truth doesn't offer closure, it offers accountability. And when your whole life is already stretched thin, accountability can feel like punishment. That's what the lie promises. Not answers, but relief. It takes the chaos and hands you villains. It makes your pain feel targeted, which means it can be conquered. But that lie doesn't just oversimplify, it mutates. And when you follow enough of these theories to their roots, they converge in the same shadows: puppet masters, secret cabals, old anti-Semitic tropes masquerading as a modern rebellion. Let's be clear, that harm is real. I have Jewish friends who carry that fear in their bodies. This isn't imagined. It isn't academic. It's danger that walks on two legs. But here's the hard truth. The very same narratives that spread this hate are often used to flatten the pain of others, to silence outrage that doesn't fit a favorite script, whether that's Gaza or the working class, or anyone whose story can't be trimmed into digestible headlines. So where does that leave us? Whether you're a veteran still nursing the quiet betrayal of the country you served, a student conditioned to believe your value began and ended with a label, a parent choosing the simpler story because complexity feels like a luxury, or the person who thinks all of this sounds ridiculous, immune to illusion. The truth is, we're all trying to make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense back. And if the stories we tell ourselves offer comfort, that's human. But comfort isn't clarity, and clarity always asks for something in return. We don't all fall for the same lies, but we all cling to something that keeps us from breaking. So maybe the real question isn't why they fell for it, but what truths we've chosen to set aside just to make this chaotic, often cruel world make a little more sense. It's easy to roll our eyes at people chasing ice walls in Antarctica or spiraling into COVID conspiracies. But how different are we if we've also traded painful truths for lies that were simply easier to live with? Thanks for sticking with me through this one. I know it's been a few weeks since the last episode dropped. Life's been lifing. Balancing work, rest, and finding time to create hasn't been easy. But this space still matters to me, and I'm grateful you're here. If this episode made you think, feel, or even just pause for a second, I'd love if you shared it, subscribed, or dropped a comment. As always, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.